It was the kind of crime that shook a town to its core. June 4, 2005, Fairview, Indiana. A town with 2 stoplights and more cornfields than houses. The kind of place where everyone knew your name and your secrets, or so they thought. That summer night, screams pierced the quiet. At 2:17 a.m., a frantic 911 call came from the Sanders residence. A teenage girl, Lila Sanders, just 17, had been found barely clinging to life on her bedroom floor. The scene was chaos. Blood smeared across the hardwood. A shattered lamp. A window forced open. By sunrise, the town had a suspect. And by sundown, they had a monster. Isaiah Dalton. A 34-year-old janitor at Fairview High. Quiet. Withdrawn. Lived alone. No wife. No kids. No friends anyone could name. That was all it took. Detectives zeroed in within hours. Lila, still in critical condition and unable to speak, couldn't confirm or deny anything. But circumstantial evidence piled up quickly. Isaiah's prints on a hallway doorknob, a shoe print near the scene that resembled his boots, and an anonymous tip claiming to have seen Isaiah near the Sanders house that night. It didn't matter that Isaiah had no record. Or that he had clocked out from his night shift at the high school across town just 40 minutes before the attack. Or that no blood was found on his clothes, body, or belongings. The narrative was set. Isaiah Dalton was a predator hiding in plain sight. And Fairview? Fairview needed someone to blame. The courthouse was packed. Small-town trials rarely made headlines beyond their borders, but this one did. Fairview hadn't seen a case this horrific in decades. Reporters lined the steps. Neighbors whispered in pews. The gallery looked less like a courtroom and more like a public execution. Isaiah sat at the defense table in silence. He didn't shout. He didn't cry. He barely blinked. Some saw that as guilt. Others saw it as defeat. The prosecution painted him with broad strokes. They called him a loner, an outsider, someone who didn't fit in. They paraded a series of witnesses, none of whom had seen the attack, but many of whom said Isaiah gave them a bad feeling. One woman said he once spoke to her child too softly, whatever that meant. Then came the so-called evidence, a work boot that looked similar to the print in the Sanders hallway, security footage showing Isaiah walking home that night, only 6 blocks from the Sanders residence, and, most damning of all, a red-stained rag found in a dumpster near his apartment. The rag turned out to be ketchup, but by then, the jury had already heard blood too many times to care. The defense pushed back. Isaiah's public defender, a worn-down man named Jerry Lawson, argued that the investigation had been rushed, biased, and based entirely on circumstantial evidence. He brought in Isaiah's co-workers, who confirmed his time card. He showed maps proving the distance between the school and the Sanders home. But it didn't matter. The moment Lila Sanders took the stand, the courtroom shifted. She was still recovering, both physically and emotionally, but she walked in with a courage that made headlines. When asked if she remembered her attacker, she said the face had been masked, but then added that Isaiah's name had been whispered to her in a dream, over and over again. That was all it took. The jury deliberated for just 6 hours. Guilty. Aggravated assault. Attempted murder. Unlawful entry. Sentencing, 45 years. As the gavel came down, Isaiah turned toward the gallery, scanning the faces. Searching. As if hoping someone, anyone, might believe in his innocence. But no one met his gaze. He was 34 years old. He would be 79 when he got out, if he made it that long. At Grayston Correctional Facility, time didn't move forward. It looped, tight, endless, suffocating. Isaiah Holt entered the prison gates under a hailstorm of whispers and camera flashes. To the outside world, he was the monster who tried to kill a teenage girl. Inside, he was something worse, a child predator, the lowest rung on the prison hierarchy. He learned quickly, don't speak unless spoken to. Don't look too long. And don't ever try to explain yourself, because no one cares. His first year was hell. He was attacked twice, once with a tray in the cafeteria, once in the shower with a sharpened toothbrush. After the second assault, he was moved to protective custody. They locked him in a 6 by 9-foot cell for 23 hours a day, and called it safety. In those early months, he stopped writing letters. At first, he tried sending a few, one to his old supervisor at the school, another to the public defender, but the silence that came back was louder than any reply. His mother had passed before his arrest. He had no siblings. No family left who believed in him. Alone became his new reality. But Isaiah didn't go numb. He went inward. He read everything. Books on law, on religion, on DNA forensics. He filled notebooks with daily logs, what happened each day, what he saw, how he felt. If there was a way out of this nightmare, he told himself, he would find it. In his 10th year behind bars, something shifted. He received a letter. It was from a paralegal student named Eleanor King, working with an Innocence Project out of Chicago. She had read about Isaiah's case in an old textbook on wrongful convictions and decided to look deeper. The more she read, the more it bothered her. There was no DNA match. No fingerprints. No weapon found. Just bias. Gut feelings. And a jury hungry for closure. Her letter was short, cautious. I don't know if I can help. But I believe you might be telling the truth. If you're willing to talk, I'm willing to listen. For the first time in a decade, Isaiah cried. He wrote back immediately. Over the next 2 years, Eleanor became Isaiah's only real connection to the outside world. She visited once every few months, each time with more documents, transcripts, old photos, testimonies no one had ever cross-checked. She pointed out flaws in the police timeline, gaps in the surveillance footage, and inconsistencies in Lila Sanders' story. But more importantly, she believed him. And that belief changed everything. I know what it's like, she said once, her voice barely above a whisper through the glass partition. To be dismissed. To be told your truth doesn't matter. But I see you, Isaiah. For the first time in 12 years, Isaiah dared to hope. But hope is a dangerous thing in prison. You hold it too tightly, it cuts you. Still, he held on. It started with a smudge. Eleanor had requested an inventory of the original evidence from the 1999 case, a shot in the dark, really. Most evidence kits from that era had been degraded or discarded. But by sheer luck, or maybe fate, Lila Sanders' clothing had been sealed, boxed, and forgotten in an off-site storage facility in Ohio. The kit had never been fully tested. Only preliminary swabs had been run. Technology in the late 90s wasn't what it was now. Eleanor submitted a formal request to have the evidence re-examined with modern DNA testing. The request was denied. She appealed. Denied again. That's when she called Malik Ortega, a civil rights attorney known for overturning wrongful convictions. He had been burned before, by fake claims, by dead ends, but something in Eleanor's voice, the raw certainty of it, moved him. Let me take a look, he said. Malik's name carried weight. Within 3 weeks, they had court approval to test the clothing. Isaiah didn't sleep the night Eleanor told him. He didn't want to believe it. Didn't want to dream. But the kit came back intact. The crime lab ran it through the national database. They found DNA from 2 male individuals, neither of them Isaiah Holt. One matched a career criminal who had never been questioned in the original investigation, Tobias Kane, a drifter with a long record of violent offenses. He had been in town that summer, working at a local junkyard, less than a mile from where Lila had been found. The other was unknown but stored, likely an accomplice or witness. Isaiah's DNA? Not present. Not even close. Malik filed a motion to vacate the conviction immediately. It was front-page news within 24 hours. New DNA evidence could exonerate convicted rapist after 20 years. Justice reconsidered. Was Isaiah Holt wrongly convicted? The media who once vilified him now scrambled to interview his lawyer. Eleanor refused. Malik declined. Isaiah waited in silence, the way he had for 2 decades. 2 weeks later, the court reconvened. Isaiah entered the courtroom in shackles. The room was full, reporters, activists, former jurors, and even some of Lila Sanders' family. They had all come to see the monster. But the monster never existed. Only a man with quiet eyes and a broken voice, standing for the first time as someone the system had betrayed. The judge read the results aloud. The DNA was conclusive. The conviction was nullified. Isaiah Holt was to be released immediately pending formal exoneration. There was no applause. Just a silence so complete it shook the walls. Isaiah didn't cry. He didn't speak. He looked out at the crowd and locked eyes with a woman in the back, Lila's older sister, Kendra Sanders. Her face was pale. Her hands trembled. And yet, she didn't look angry. She looked sorry. As the deputies unshackled him, Isaiah stood still for a moment. Then, slowly, he walked forward into the light. The prison gates clanged open with a final groan. For the first time in 20 years, Isaiah Holt stood outside without chains. It was early morning. The air was cold, crisp, almost too clean for someone used to recycled prison air and rusting walls. A single car waited by the curb, a black sedan, rental plates. Eleanor stepped out the moment she saw him. Isaiah squinted. "You're real," he murmured. She nodded, brushing a tear from her cheek. "So are you." They didn't hug, not yet. 2 decades builds walls even love can't immediately climb. But they stood shoulder to shoulder, sharing silence more intimate than words. "I didn't think this day would come," Isaiah said, voice gravelly. "I thought I'd die in there." Eleanor swallowed hard. "You almost did." As she drove, Isaiah stared out the window at a world that had moved on without him. Billboards for tech companies, people wearing wireless earbuds, teenagers with faces buried in glowing screens, it all looked like science fiction. He clutched the seatbelt awkwardly, like a man holding a foreign object. "Everything's different," he said. "Not everything," Eleanor replied gently. "Your story still matters." They didn't go straight home. Isaiah's name was still tied to a monstrous crime. Despite the exoneration, whispers followed him. Stares pierced through him at gas stations. Cameras lurked at every corner. Eleanor took him to a halfway house in Dayton that specialized in post-exoneration reentry. It was humble, shared rooms, group therapy, job training, but it was safe. That night, Isaiah sat alone by a small window, staring at the stars. He hadn't seen them in 20 years. A knock broke the stillness. A staff member handed him a sealed envelope. The return address made his hands freeze. Kendra Sanders. Inside was a short, handwritten letter. "Dear Mr. Holt, my family owes you an apology we can never fully give. I don't know how we got it so wrong. But I believe you now. I saw your face in court. I saw the man who survived what we helped create. I'm so sorry. If you're ever willing, I'd like to meet." Kendra. Isaiah's hands trembled as he folded the letter. He didn't cry. He just sat, holding the paper like it was a piece of something holy. The next morning, Malik Ortega visited with updates. "You've got a shot at a full exoneration by the state," he said. "And a major civil suit." Isaiah shrugged. "I don't care about money." "You should," Malik replied. "It's not just about you. It's about the system that failed you. Making them pay? That forces change." Isaiah paused. "What happens to the guy whose DNA they found?" "Tobias Kane?" Malik said. "He died 6 years ago. Overdose in Indiana." Isaiah's jaw clenched. "So he never faced anything?" "No," Malik said. "But the second DNA profile, we're running it now. You deserve to know the full truth." That night, Eleanor visited again. They walked outside, beneath a pale moon. "I got a letter," Isaiah said quietly. "From Lila's sister." Eleanor looked up. "That must have been hard." "I don't know what to say to her," he admitted. "I spent 20 years hating her family. Now I'm not sure if I hate anything at all." She turned to him, eyes full of a pain only time could soften. "Then that means you survived." They stood there for a long time, saying nothing. Tomorrow would bring cameras, legal filings, news specials. But tonight, Isaiah Holt was simply a free man under the stars, beginning the long journey toward healing. 3 weeks after Isaiah's release, Malik Ortega showed up unannounced at the Reentry home, his face grave. "We need to talk," he said, voice low. Isaiah nodded. He had grown used to tension, used to people approaching him like they were stepping into a haunted house. But this was different. Malik's eyes held something heavier than legal strategy. They sat in a small, private meeting room. Malik placed a manila folder on the table between them. "We got the results from the second DNA profile. The one that was on Lila's clothes but didn't match you or Tobias Kane." Isaiah leaned forward, heart thudding. Malik opened the folder and slid a photo across the table. Isaiah froze. "No," he whispered. The photo was of a man in his early 50s. Short cropped hair, tired eyes. A face Isaiah hadn't seen in 2 decades, but one he could never forget. It was Officer Vernon Talbot. Isaiah's arresting officer. The same man who had shoved him into a squad car that night. The same man who testified in court that Isaiah had the eyes of a killer. Isaiah felt the floor shift beneath him. He was part of the original investigation, Malik said. His DNA was never collected. Back then, it wasn't protocol. But this new test from Lila's clothing, it's a perfect match. Isaiah couldn't breathe. "You're saying, the cop who arrested me, was there?" he asked. Malik nodded grimly. He wasn't just there. According to this, he was likely the last person Lila saw. The next few days blurred. The story exploded. Retired officer linked to cold case murder by DNA. Cop who helped convict innocent man now suspected in teen's attack. Isaiah watched the headlines from the same small room he had slept in for weeks, but now, the walls felt tighter than any cell he'd ever known. He kept hearing Vernon Talbot's voice. "We got him. We got our guy. Justice for Lila." It had all been a lie. Worse than a lie, it was a cover-up. The DA reopened the investigation. Talbot was questioned, but he lawyered up immediately. He denied everything. Said the evidence was compromised. That it was planted. But he couldn't deny the DNA. And then came the bombshell. The forensic review uncovered that the original lab technician who processed Lila's rape kit, an officer who had worked closely with Talbot, had gone missing 2 years after the trial. Car accident. No investigation. The pieces were falling together like ash in the wind. This wasn't negligence. It was orchestration. Isaiah sat with Eleanor one evening, staring blankly at the television as the news looped the same footage of Talbot leaving a courthouse, sunglasses shielding his face. "They always said I was a monster," Isaiah said. "But he's the one who killed her." Eleanor reached for his hand. "You didn't just lose 20 years. You were forced to carry someone else's sin." Isaiah shook his head, voice raw. "I was afraid of him. Even before the trial. I thought it was just the uniform. But now, it all makes sense." That night, Isaiah returned to the letter from Kendra Sanders. He stared at her words. "If you're ever willing, I'd like to meet." He picked up a pen. "Dear Kendra, I got your letter. There's more you need to know. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a cover-up. I'm ready to talk. But not for me. For Lila. She deserves the truth, even if it hurts." The coffee shop was quiet, tucked away in a corner of the city where people still moved slowly and looked each other in the eye. Isaiah sat near the back, his hands wrapped around a lukewarm mug. He wore a plain button-down shirt and slacks. No one stared, but he felt exposed anyway. He hadn't been in public like this, truly seen, in years. Then, she walked in. Kendra Sanders. Older now, of course, mid-30s, with a streak of silver in her hair that hadn't been there in the photos. But her face still bore the imprint of that young girl's grief. Sharp eyes. Guarded posture. A woman who'd learned to carry heartbreak like a badge. She saw him immediately. Their eyes locked. For a moment, neither moved. Then, slowly, Kendra approached. "Isaiah," she said, her voice even but uncertain. He stood. "Kendra. Thank you for coming." They Saturday. Silence settled between them like a fog. "I didn't think you'd write back," she said, folding her hands tightly in her lap. "I almost didn't," Isaiah admitted. "I didn't think I had anything to give you that could help." Kendra looked away, blinking fast. "I used to imagine this moment. Over and over. What I'd say if I ever saw you again. But now I'm here, and none of it fits." Isaiah nodded. "I know the feeling." They sat in that silence for a while. Long enough for their drinks to go cold. Then, Isaiah reached into his coat pocket and slid a folded document across the table. Kendra picked it up with trembling fingers. It was a copy of the lab report. Vernon Talbot's name was circled. She read the page, lips tightening with each line. Her eyes scanned the evidence, the match, the timeline, the new investigation. And when she finally looked up at him, tears rimmed her eyes. "I hated you for so long," she whispered. "I blamed you for everything. I stood in court and called you a monster." "You weren't wrong to grieve," Isaiah said softly. "You lost someone you loved. You were told I did it. You believed what everyone said." "No," she said, her voice cracking. "I didn't just believe it. I needed it. I needed someone to blame because the real truth, that was too big, too dark." Her hands were shaking now. Isaiah gently pushed a napkin toward her. "I didn't know Lila," he said. "Not really. We passed in the hall a few times. She smiled once, when I helped her pick up a book she dropped. That's all I had of her. And somehow, that smile, that moment, ended up costing me 20 years. Kendra looked away, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I want to believe this," she said, holding up the report. "But it doesn't change what's gone. She's still gone." Isaiah leaned in. "No, it doesn't change that. But it means you can stop blaming the wrong person. And maybe we can both stop carrying something that doesn't belong to us." The rawness in his voice cracked something in Kendra's heart. For the first time, she really saw him, not as the boy in the courtroom, not as the face on the newspaper, but as a man who had survived the unthinkable. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." Isaiah didn't answer right away. He let the words settle. Let them breathe. Then he said, "Me too." After that meeting, something shifted. Kendra became vocal. She stood beside Isaiah in press conferences. She gave interviews. She called for a full investigation into the original trial. "I helped convict an innocent man," she said on national TV. "Because I trusted the system. But the system was broken. Still is." Her words carried weight. Not just because she was the victim's sister, but because she had been part of the machine that destroyed Isaiah's life. And now, she was helping dismantle it. That summer, Vernon Talbot was arrested. The evidence was overwhelming: DNA, testimony, internal records from the precinct that had been buried in archive boxes for decades. Isaiah watched the footage on a small TV in his apartment. Talbot didn't look like a monster. Just an old man in handcuffs. Funny how that worked. The courthouse steps were packed. Journalists lined the path. Protesters held signs that read "Justice delayed is justice denied," and "Free them all." Supporters chanted Isaiah's name as he stepped forward, microphone in hand, a nervous calm in his eyes. He didn't flinch under the weight of the cameras. He didn't shrink from the attention. Because this time, the world wasn't accusing him. It was listening. "I stand here not just for myself," Isaiah began, his voice steady, clear. "But for every person whose name never made it to a headline. For every innocent man and woman still sitting behind bars because someone needed a conviction more than they needed the truth." He paused, letting it hang. "I lost 20 years. I lost family, friends, time I will never get back. But I'm not here today to talk about what was taken. I'm here to talk about what we're building. Behind him stood Kendra Sanders, her eyes filled with tears, her presence silent but powerful. To one side stood Trina Davis, fierce, relentless, now a nationally recognized advocate for justice reform. On the other side was Marcus Reeds, once a student, now a public defender inspired by Isaiah's case. Together, they represented something bigger than one man's exoneration. They represented a movement. The Isaiah Project. What started as a quiet promise between Isaiah and Trina became a full-blown national initiative. The Isaiah Project, a non-profit dedicated to overturning wrongful convictions, providing legal aid to the accused, and offering reentry support to the formerly incarcerated. It grew fast. Law firms offered pro bono hours. Universities sent interns. Retired judges and forensic scientists volunteered to review cold cases. Isaiah, the man once called a monster, now stood at the center of a revolution. Not because he wanted revenge, but because he refused to be the last. The price of freedom. There were nights Isaiah still woke in the dark, heart pounding, trapped in old memories. The clang of a cell door. The hum of fluorescent lights. The slow, aching crawl of time. Some things didn't leave scars. They left echoes. But in those moments, he'd reach for the photo on his nightstand, him and his mother, taken just weeks before her death. And now beside it, a second photo, him and Kendra, standing outside the Jamal Evans Justice Center, arms around each other, both smiling through the pain. He hadn't just gained freedom. He'd gained a family. A system on trial. The fallout from Talbot's arrest was seismic. Officers who had falsified reports were investigated. 2 prosecutors were disbarred. A task force was created to audit hundreds of old cases tied to Talbot and his former colleagues. The state launched a commission, funded by bipartisan lawmakers, to investigate racial bias in the justice system. And Isaiah was there for all of it. Testifying. Advocating. Showing up. Every time. Because for him, silence was never an option again. Years later, Isaiah stood in a quiet cemetery, flowers in hand. He found the grave easily. He had visited it every year since his release. Lila Sanders. Gone too young. Taken too violently. He knelt, laying the flowers gently beside the headstone. I didn't know you, he whispered. But your name changed my life. Took it apart. And somehow, gave it back to me. He sat for a long time, letting the wind carry his words. When he finally stood, he looked back once. Then walked away, not in anger, not in sorrow, but with a kind of peace he never thought he'd know. Today, the Isaiah Thomas Center for Justice sits at the heart of the city. Its walls are filled with the stories of exonerees. Its halls echo with the footsteps of students, lawyers, and families who still believe justice is worth fighting for. Tours always end in one particular room, a circular gallery of faces, each one someone the system failed, each one now free. At the center of the gallery is a single plaque. They called him a monster. But the truth called him something else. A man. A survivor. And in the end, a symbol of justice that refused to stay silent. If you enjoyed this episode of Chase Studio Stories, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your support helps us continue to share impactful and meaningful content.